to say the least. Let's bring in Lee Carter, Vince Coglianese, Betsy Woodruff, and Gina Loudon. Lee, I want to go to you. You do the dials. You get the feel of the pulse of people. What's happening here? I know that a lot of people are offended that Marco Rubio comes in third in Iowa and the media plays him up as if he won, but he's got the most winning sales right now.
You know, what's really interesting is he behaved like a winner that night. He looked at that as a victory, and he knew he had to come in third place or he was going to go nowhere. So he acted like a winner coming into New Hampshire. Now, the thing about him right now is he's got this momentum going for him. He's sort of a late bloomer, I would say. You even watch him in a debate. It's sort of the third quarter that he comes in strong. He's got his stride. He's got his groove. And I think that his whole strategy was, I need to come in third. I'm going to start taking a surge. I'm going to be positive and optimistic. Let the top two, one of them's going to look like a loser, and I'm going to start taking it in.
Well, he's definitely taking it in. Gina, there's also another poll out of CNN WMUR poll. It's got a smaller sample size. In that poll, Trump's got the lead, but it's only 29%. And here, Rubio completely overtakes Cruz, 18% to 13%. Could things change in New Hampshire? Could we actually have an upset?
You know, we could, but we have to remember this is a long race, and this is just the first two steps, very small. But I think what's interesting here, Charles, that conservatives should note is what I've pointed to on your show before, and that is that the goal of the establishment all along was to divide the top two most independent, least establishment candidates and usher in their establishment candidate. They see this as their moment, and Rubio's performing like a star, and I think people better wake up and quit doing the circular fire amongst conservatives, or we're definitely going to see one of these guys start rising fast. You know,
Betsy, that has been a narrative, throughout the last couple of weeks in particular. Who's a conservative, who's not a conservative? I've seen people that have fought for the conservative cause for 3 or 4 decades being called rhinos. And I guess if you're establishment, you're just kind of sitting around and say, keep it going, keep it going.
It's true, and the establishment supporters must feel like they're finally having a moment of peace, given that there are so many moderate establishment candidates duking it out. And what's exciting about the New Hampshire primary coming up is that it's going to be a total bloodbath, because it's the last chance for so many of these guys, Chris Christie, John Kasich, and Jeb Bush in particular, to communicate that they might actually be viable, credible candidates. That's why Chris Christie is name-calling. That's why Jeb Bush's brother just cut an ad for his super PAC. We're seeing these guys pull out all the stops. New Hampshire voters, of course, are notoriously flaky. Some political scientists say that many won't decide who they're going to vote for until within a week or two of the primary. So that's why things are a little chaotic right now. And at least for the moment, for moderates, maybe they can enjoy that the chaos is concentrated among conservatives.
Maybe. But here's the deal, too, Vince. The so-called establishment moderate side, their egos are getting in the way, too. If there's some sort of monolithic unit with one puppet master, he hasn't been able to get these rowdy kids under control, because he would have said, hey, Kasich, Bush, all you guys drop out. Nevertheless, it is going to be a bloodbath. How do you see it?
I think the voters are going to have to determine that. Betsy's right. These guys are all putting all their money on New Hampshire. At this point, it's break free or die for all of these candidates. And Chris Christie especially, it's funny to listen to him say what he's saying now about Marco Rubio, because this is where he's put all of his marbles. This is where he's been trying to get endorsements. New Hampshire is where we're going to see who really is the establishment candidate who's going to come out and lead the rest of the way in this race. And right now, Marco Rubio, agree or not on his conservative credentials, which there is some debate now about that. You agree or not, he is going to be sort of the establishment candidate coming out of this, and he could have a very dramatic performance in New Hampshire in just a couple days away.
Well, Rush Limbaugh has gone out and said, go ahead, Gina, go ahead.
But he would need to win it. He would need to take it. He would need to overtake Trump to really be the most viable candidate, because I think it's been really a very long time before someone that hasn't won Iowa or New Hampshire has ended up being the nominee. So that's something to keep in mind.
That's a great point. What do you think, Lee?
I think that we're all going to be a little bit surprised by what's going to happen. I don't think this is going to play out like we've seen anything play out before. I think there's so much opposition to Trump and to Cruz. As many people support him, there are that many people against him. And I think once we can get ourselves around one candidate, then we're going to start to see something different. And I think Rubio has the potential to do that. And I think if you remember what happened back when we were talking about McCain in 2008, he was sort of nowhere and came up from behind and surprised everybody. And I think Rubio could do the very same thing.
I think we're going to have a protracted race here. If Rubio is not the front runner here, if he does come in second, I think we'll have a protracted race because you will see the establishment forces starting to line up behind Rubio to take on Cruz or Trump. I don't think this race ends quickly.
Although I got to tell you,
if it's second
Betsy,
place.
it was interesting today. We talked, someone mentioned endorsements. I know Rubio picked up an endorsement from a Tea Party member of Congress out in Arizona. So again, the lines are very blurred. Rush Limbaugh's gone out and said, hey, you know, forget about the Gang of Eight thing. Everything else about Rubio has been conservative. So again, I'm not sure who the moderate is, who the conservative is. And I think that makes it all even more confusing.
There are a whole bunch of different purity tests that you can use to determine whether or not a candidate is conservative or not. There's a million different scorecards. It's pretty hectic. But one thing that's important to keep in mind with all this is that Marco Rubio's press team, his PR operation, is incredibly effective. They've been really good at persuading a lot of DC reporters, a lot of political operatives, that Rubio is perhaps more competitive than he might actually be. That's why after Iowa, Rubio got practically as many favorable headlines as Ted Cruz did. And Ted Cruz won the thing, for goodness sakes. So I think people living in D.C., myself included, we have to be really careful not to buy into conventional wisdom that Rubio is this formidable and inevitable force. Of course, he might win, but right now, there's not a single poll putting him above third place, maybe one or two. Things are still tough for him, and I think people might be overestimating how competitive he is.
And being an establishment doesn't mean moderation, by the way. It could mean sportsmanship. I mean, the guy could work very well with other people, and that could be a rule by which he's an establishment guy.
Gina, let me ask you, Donald Trump is, it's still really upset about what happened with Ben Carson and the Ted Cruz dust up, if you will. It feels like perhaps even he's at this point more upset about it than Ben Carson. Do you think he should be changing his focus, though, a little bit, learning from the lessons of Iowa, focus on the ground game? I understand he has increased his appearances in New Hampshire, but should he go for broke? Should he hit the ground running and forget about what happened in Iowa and focus on New Hampshire?
You know, that would be my advice, Charles. That's pretty sound, I think, if that he should look at going forward. But this is also more evidence of the fact that he is not a polished, prepared politician. He doesn't know how to do what politicians know how to do. And this is where people like Cruz and Rubio have a huge advantage of him. And I think that also the establishment should see this, and does see this rather, as their last chance to make sure they have open borders. If they can defeat Cruz or Trump in New Hampshire, they will see this as a way to keep the open borders and the cash cows come into Washington, D.C. that their jobs all depend on.
Well, overwhelmingly, Trump wins on immigration and border control, and that's something I think most Americans want. To what degree it ranks varies from week to week. I want to switch over, guys. Let's switch our gears to the Democrats. Bernie Sanders holding on to a comfortable lead over Hillary in this brand new NBC Wall Street Journal poll. He's up 20 points there. But remember, though, back in 2008, it was a very similar situation. And then there was a senator named Barack Obama. He was leading big time. He came out of Iowa with all kinds of wins in his cells, and Clinton won. Can she do it again, Betsy? And if she does, will she have to cry again to make it happen?
I think Clinton is certainly the formidable favorite overall for the nomination. That said, is she going to win New Hampshire? Probably not. But here's the thing. There's an expectation right now that Bernie Sanders is going to win New Hampshire, and not just win it, but win by 20 points. That's what the Real Clear Politics average shows. That's what most public polling shows. Even if Clinton doesn't win New Hampshire, if she narrows Bernie Sanders' lead, if she comes within maybe 15, 10, 5 points of him, then I think that really undercuts Sanders' team's argument that there's this inexorable momentum that he'll be able to take to South Carolina and Nevada. If Clinton can sort of cut her losses in New Hampshire, it's going to be really great news for her going forward.
You know, Vince, I would also think that somehow Hillary Clinton's got to figure out a way to chip away at the younger vote, sort of chip away at some of the narratives that Sanders not only dominates in, but that really has propelled him and given him a lot of confidence. Even if she doesn't win New Hampshire, maybe that could be a goal for her.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, maybe she's discounting the fact that young people don't vote as often as they should, and maybe that's part of her calculus. But the reality is that Sanders has 75% of anybody who's even close to being considered young in New Hampshire. And that's a big advantage for him, and it's going to be the reason that he wins by such a wide margin. It's kind of interesting. Look, coming out of Iowa, just the fact that Sanders got close to Hillary Clinton was a win for Sanders, I think. And in the same way, as Betsy just alluded to, if Hillary gets close to Sanders when she's in New Hampshire, that's a win for Hillary. So the person who wins isn't necessarily the winner. It really comes down to how close they get to winning.
Lee, I watched Sanders after Monday, and his speech, in my mind, was sort of, if I'm a 23-year-old, it's electrifying. testifying, this guy's on my side, I'm saddled in debt, it's a hopeless situation, someone's going to give me a lift, an upper hand. When you do the dials, when you check pulses, I mean, isn't that what really gets people's blood pumping, at least in that age range?
Oh, for sure. What's in it for me? That's what everybody needs to hear. And Bernie is doing that in spades for young people. He's energizing young people, which is so surprising for a man in his 70s that he's the one that's speaking to them, but he is. He's connecting to this pulse of optimism and that we can get your lives back on track, that America can be the country that takes care of you and provides you with opportunities in a very different way than we've heard before. And people love him. No matter the message, no matter the time, the younger generation is responding to him. Even in last night's town hall, you heard he's so comfortable in his own skin. He's got this trust, this magnetism that people are just drawn to.
All right, guys, thank you very much.